Benefit from trusted clinical content and the latest medical research with Clinical Key AI. Now offering individual, annual, and monthly subscriptions. Start your free 14-day trial today. Streamline your treatment recommendations and tackle complex clinical questions with our advanced AI conversational search tool. Designed specifically for clinicians and residents, access a wealth of knowledge from Braunwald's heart disease to The Lancet, all at your fingertips. Visit join.elsevier.com/free trial CKAI to begin your trial today.
Hi, everybody. I'm Michael Carisse, welcoming you to Raise the Line with Osmosis from Elsevier, an ongoing exploration about how to improve health and healthcare. Well, we have a special guest on today's episode whose voice will be familiar to regular listeners of the show. A year ago at this time, Dr. Raven Baxter occupied the Raise the Line host chair for a special 10-part series we produced in collaboration with the Cohen Center for Recovery from Complex Chronic Illness at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai in New York City, where she serves as the Director of Science Communication. The series explored the latest understandings of post-acute infection syndromes, such as chronic Lyme, long COVID, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and several others, with an array of experts from the center and also other leading researchers and providers in this space. We thought it'd be interesting to check back in with Dr. Baxter to get an update on the Cohen Center, also known as CORE, and find out what has changed in our understanding of infection-associated chronic illnesses over the last year. So thanks very much for being with us today, Dr. Baxter. It's great to see you again.
It's good to see you again, Michael. It's always great to come on here. Thanks for having me.
So even though you were the host of this show for 10 episodes last year, we actually didn't learn a lot about your your career trajectory because you were doing the interviewing and not answering the questions. So I thought it'd be a good place to start to find out about how you got interested in science and biology and what happened, along the way in your career that led you to your current role at the Cohen Center.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for asking. I'm really just a lifelong learner and science lover, and I've been that way as a child. I like to tell people I came out of the womb as a scientist and with a million questions and gave my mother a run for her money as a child because she didn't have a scientific background, but she was just as curious as I was to figure things out. And so she helped me along, and that led me into a scientific career. I eventually got a undergraduate and graduate degree in biology with an emphasis on molecular biology and protein structure and evolution. And I then went into a career in the biotech industry in high throughput drug discovery. And really, in that role as a research scientist in the biotech world, I just realized what a gap there was between the communities in which the science was done and the laboratory itself. And it didn't really sit right with me to come into work on a daily basis and just feel like a hoarder of knowledge and opportunity. So I actually pivoted. I decided to leave and get a PhD. And I ultimately pivoted into science education rather than getting a PhD in, biology, which is what all of my other degrees are in. And it was very rewarding. I learned a lot about how people think, how people learn, what people value, and how people's values influence their learning and their worldview, and how we can better understand people's worldview to impact scientific learning. And from there, I was just inspired to help people learn about each other while learning science. And so I grew a huge platform on social media because that's where people are talking to each other these days.
Right.
And
Raven the Science Maven, right?
yes, I came up with this moniker because, well, at least medical students should be of age to know, like my actual name, Raven Baxter, is the same name as a really, really popular character on the Disney Channel. So,
That's so
um,
Raven.
that's so Raven, correct. And so I decided to go by a different name so as to not be confused with, the Disney character, people still confuse us. But yeah, I now have a following of I think almost 500,000 people online collectively,
Wow.
and I'm just really excited about getting building community around science while teaching science. And so it just so happened that my career took off during the COVID-19 pandemic. And while I was in grad school, I I was finishing grad school during the pandemic, and I turned my sights to communicating about vaccination and the immune system and what a pandemic is. And that is where I initially grew my following. And then a couple of years after that, I was actually severely impacted by the virus itself and eventually became disabled by long COVID. So that was the huge turn of events. And, my perspective on chronic illness really changed. My perspective on disability changed. And I realized that patients were doing a lot of the work and educating themselves and educating physicians about chronic illness. And I didn't think that was fair for patients who are so severely burdened by this illness to have to bear another burden of educating physicians on how to give them proper treatment and care and not dismiss them or gaslight them into thinking that there's nothing wrong with them just because we don't have the answers yet. So, as we have developed answers about long COVID and its causes and how to address them, David Petrino, who is the director of our center, the Cohen Center for Recovery from Complex Chronic Illness, reached out and he knew how heavily impacted I had become by long COVID, but I was recovering and really was looking for an opportunity to get into education. And he just saw a perfect fit at the center and me leading educational initiatives to help us develop opportunities for physicians to learn how to assess and treat and manage complex chronic illnesses, specifically infection associated chronic illnesses. And so that's where I am. The core, which is the short name for our center, is the world's first medical center that focuses on infection associated chronic illnesses. And we have really just hit the ground running and we're now launching our education initiatives this year. So very exciting times.
Yeah. And it does sound like a really interesting spot to be, to combine all of the things you were just telling us about, your educational background and communication skills and everything. I'm curious about, what about your experience as a patient do you think has made you a more effective communicator, or how has that experience affected your work as a communicator?
You know, I think that I certainly would not have been able to do this job as effectively if I had not been a patient, because when you're in the position of a patient, you understand what things get misunderstood and dismissed in the treatment room. And for some of the illnesses that we are seeing at our center, there is a several years gap between in diagnosis, basically. It could take someone 7 years to reach a diagnosis for their illness. And so, what is happening during those 7 years? You're going from doctor to doctor, and they may or may not believe everything that you're telling them. They may not really understand what you're saying, or they just don't know what to do. And so I have to really pull from all of my buckets of expertise to do this job and really just put myself back into my shoes of when I was very ill. What are some things that I wish doctors knew as far as skills and resources? And also just listening to other patients' stories. What are their experiences and what are the things that they need and want to know? And of course, we are talking to clinicians. What do they want to know? Where are their gaps in knowledge and how can we support them in joining the effort to make sure that everyone has access to this treatment?
How much of your work is targeting clinicians versus the broader public?
Right now, the bulk of our efforts are focused on clinicians. So we're building accredited programs so that clinicians can earn credit for learning about chronic illnesses that are infection associated. And we are at a medical school. So we are running a second round of our elective course within the medical school this fall. And that will be available to the medical students, of course, and we'll teach them about infection associated chronic illnesses. But we want to make sure that everything is accessible. And so we've also developed an IACI, which is Infection Associated Chronic Illness Provider Manual. And this is a manual that was co-written by the clinicians at our center and as well as our collaborators in various places across the world. And it is essentially a blueprint for how we run our center, how our center got established, the roots and drivers of IACIs, and how we assess them and how we treat them, and as well as the scientific backing behind all of this. All of the recommendations that we provide are evidence based. And this document is almost 200 pages long.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's very comprehensive, and that will be available on our website in the summer of 2025. And that will be available again for any clinician in the world to use as a resource.
I would think it would be a very welcome resource for those folks because it's kind
Absolutely.
of bewildering what they're facing. It sort of leads me to a question I had about your assessment of what's happening with providers. Are these messages getting through to them? I mean, the story you tell about the diagnostic odyssey and not listening to patients and dismissing their concerns and giving up on them, really. Do you sense that that's changing at all? And maybe has long COVID had an impact on that because there's just so many more patients coming in with these sorts of issues?
I certainly think that we're trending in a positive direction as far as physician awareness of IACIs. But what we have proven at our center is that education is a key to really advancing awareness and knowledge of best practices in treating IACIs. We conducted a survey at one of our accredited events, a workshop catered to clinicians to learn about IACIs. And the before and after differences in just even the belief that that these illnesses exist is really significant. Where mind you, people signed up for this workshop. So these are people who opted in. Before the workshop, 10% of the people who signed up strongly doubted the existence of some of these illnesses. And then after the workshop, these same people took the survey and we nearly erased all doubt of the existence of these illnesses. And
Wow.
that was just one workshop. So think of what we can do with a program, right? Think of what we can do for medical students. Think of what we can do through our ICI provider manual and just continued reiterated efforts of outreach and education. I really think that we will be able to shift the narrative that currently exists for chronic illnesses that are infection associated.
In terms of priorities, is it more important to reach primary care docs, or what kind of clinicians are you most hoping will get this information?
Honestly, anyone who gets it, it's is going to become a valuable resource for many people. So I think right now we are emphasizing primary care physicians because these are people who perhaps see their patients most frequently. But honestly, we want everyone who is treating patients to be knowledgeable about these practices.
Yeah. Well, yeah, good luck with that. I hope you achieve that mission. So I know you've also launched the Knowledge Collaborative at the center. What's that all about?
Yes. So this work is not done in a vacuum. We have a lot of collaborators who are excited about this work and support us, and they lend their expertise to inform the resources that we develop. We share knowledge. We are all from different backgrounds. So we have people in the Knowledge Collaborative who are physicians, right? Maybe they're primary care physicians. We have psychiatrists, we have researchers who are driving the science forward, and then we have people who are specialists in IACIs and do functional medicine, or people who are non-specialists, but they want to lend their expertise from a non-specialist perspective. We have students, faculty, all kinds of people involved, and also some of our stakeholders, our funders, who want to make sure that everything is in alignment. But it's a very diverse group of people who are stakeholders in this work and want to see it succeed.
Yeah, that's great. I sort of want to shift a little bit to the broader context about science communication at this time. COVID, I think, helped people understand that there was a lot more distrust of science and expertise than perhaps we realized before. Really came to a head there. And unfortunately, what's going on in Washington right now has, I think, accelerated all of that. So I guess I'm curious about what you think right now are the biggest challenges for science communicators and what some of your strategies are for overcoming that.
Well, there was a survey done by the Linus Group, and they surveyed, I believe, about 1,000 early career physicians and asked them questions about the future of healthcare. And they identified the top threat to the future of healthcare as misinformation. And that is really alarming. I think that when we think about healthcare, we think about insurance, we think about inequities, but physicians with their boots on the ground in the treatment rooms are saying misinformation is actually the top threat. And so, as a science communicator, we have a skill set to combat misinformation. And personally, I think that every physician should have a platform online to combat misinformation and share their expertise with the world. So, what you'll see from our center in the coming months is a stronger presence on social media. We will be addressing information regarding chronic illness, complex chronic illness, and trying to dispel myths and misunderstandings about these illnesses.
So say I'm a primary care doc and, this is a big problem that I've identified, the misinformation thing. What do you do? Like how do you get online? Is there some sort of template? Is there a couple, 3 steps that they could take to start having that presence and fighting the tide?
That's a really great question. And it's something that I actually do consulting work for. I get this question all the time. And it's, you have to do a few things, right? First and foremost, it's not for everybody. Like my pie in the sky is that every person in STEM, especially in this climate, but in, I mean, in relation to this conversation, clinicians for sure should have a presence, but that's not the reality, right? But if you feel inclined to combat misinformation, the first thing that you should do is develop a digital platform because I think Pew Research came out with a study that says most people between 18 and 25 get almost 100% of their news from social media. So
Right.
if we're not there to fill in that void, other people will fill it for us. And the narrative may not be consistent with what's the truth or the fact,
Right.
really. So I think find out why you want to do it. What is your message? Who do you want to talk to? Who's your audience? What do you want people to feel or think when they come across your content? What kind of style do you want to deliver this in? Do you want to be more traditional and do talking heads? Do you want to do skits? Do you want to do art like poetry or music, painting, fashion? Do you want to tie your healthcare messaging in through sports or popular culture? There's so many different ways to communicate. You could write, you could do journalism, you could break down the latest research or talk about your story or talk about the latest current events that impact your work or just things that you're excited about. There's so many ways to take up space and grow your audience and gain trust so that people will want to listen to the science and the medicine information that you have to share.
Yeah. So, in your experience with this really huge online following that you've got, what kind of content that you put out gets the most engagement?
Definitely content where people are able to gain a sense of agency over their lives. There's so many things happening in this world that feel very out of control. And anytime that I can provide a scientific fact, a tidbit, or something that gets somebody's light bulb to go off and say, ah, I can do something about that, you know, or they learn something about themselves that they probably wouldn't have learned otherwise. Those are probably my biggest impactful pieces of content.
I'm so interested that you mentioned fashion as an element here. Talk to us about
Okay.
how that fits into making this kind of communication more effective.
It's funny that you say that. So I'm showing it to you, Michael, but I'm showing Michael these bedazzled lab goggles.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
regular lab goggles, but they have rhinestones
Really cool. Yeah.
super glued onto them. And I wear them because I realize that perception does matter, relatability does matter. As a doctoral student, I did a lot of research on how people's perceptions of scientists impact their science learning. And
Mm.
it is proven time and time again in educational research that if your learner relates to you personally, they will have better learning outcomes. And so
Right.
I try not to stick to the stereotypical narrative of what a scientist looks like. I never wear a lab coat in my content. I'm usually
Hmm.
wearing something pink or frilly, just fashionable, really. And that's how I prefer to dress. And I get a lot of comments from people saying, wow, not only did I learn something, but I also didn't know that scientists could look like this. You're really cool. And I'm like,
Yeah.
thanks. But that's important. And that is how you build an audience, just being unapologetically you and showing that human side of yourself that we don't really get to see in the mainstream media.
Yeah. Plus, I would think that, if you just stick with the white coat thing, there's a zillion videos out there with people standing in white coats. So what you're talking about would sort of pop out visually and otherwise.
Definitely. Yes. And you never really want people to trust you just because you have a white coat. And that is something that I actually recently said, and everyone was very receptive of that because you can buy a white coat on Amazon and have zero credentials and
Yeah. Right.
video, and people might believe you just because you bought your lab coat from Amazon and put it on. So there's that.
So as you know, we've got an audience of learners in the health professions and even early career professionals. So what's your advice to people listening who are interested maybe in following your footsteps into science communication?
Gosh. Well, first and foremost, I would say do it unapologetically. I get a lot of questions from students who really struggle with, how can I say this? Respectability politics. And they're afraid to be themselves because they think that they'll be judged by people who are senior to them and that they'll lose opportunities if they speak out. And I certainly understand that, especially in this political climate. But I think that if you're passionate about something, nobody should be able to take that away from you. If you feel compelled to speak about something, that's really special. I think your voice is something that no one should be able to take away from you. And as far as losing opportunities from being your unapologetic self, you want to go somewhere where you are welcomed and you as yourself, not a caricature of yourself, not a misrepresentation of yourself. You want to go where all of you is welcomed. And so if you don't show the world who you are, how will you get opportunities that are meant just for you? So, with all that being said, if you feel compelled to have a science communication career, dig deep, find out what your message is, what your voice is, how you want to share, what kind of community you want to cultivate around yourself, and have fun. It's very fun. I love when I see young students and really just students in general, not just young, when I see students build their scientific communication careers because it's just very rewarding. It's very rewarding.
As a person who's been in communications for a long time, I think the most important word you use there is authenticity, because you are just a much more compelling presence if you're really yourself. If you're like, okay, this is the way I should sound because I'm a molecular biologist or I'm a primary care physician, there's going to be a something missing. But if you're really who you are and you're comfortable and, you believe in what you're saying completely, then you just come across in a different way, I think.
Absolutely. Yes. That's the way to go, honestly.
Yeah. But I can see what you're saying, particularly for younger folks. You're putting yourself out there a little bit, and you do worry about career progression and all the other things. So, yeah, whatever they can muster to kind of get past that awkwardness or concern, that's really sort of the key.
It's a muscle, right? I think jumping all in can be terrifying, but do a little thing every week that makes you just a little uncomfortable. You're not hurting anybody, you're not disrespecting anybody, like you're not in trouble, but challenge yourself to get out of your box and get a little uncomfortable and then see how you feel after. Do you feel glad? Do you feel proud of yourself? Do you feel like you're getting closer to your goal? And if so, keep going. That's how I did it, and it worked for me. So, I'd be curious to know if it works for you too.
Well, this is really wonderful advice. And as you noted in the survey earlier in the show, communications right now is really the heart of the battle, which means that the work that you're doing at the Cohen Center is so critically important. And we just wish you all the luck in the world with it.
Thank you so much. And I am excited to see how many lives we can touch through our efforts.
I'm sure it'll be many, many, many. So listen, Dr. Baxter, this has been such a pleasure to spend some time with you and learn more about you and your background and the work that you're doing. And I just really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you so much, Michael.
I'm Michael Carisse. Thanks for checking out today's show. And remember to do your part to raise the line and strengthen the healthcare system. We're all in this together.
If you like this podcast, please share it on your social channels. You can also subscribe to the series and check out all of our episodes at osmosis.org/raisethelinepodcast.